With Kings Island opening for the 2025 season this past weekend, here are the top 5 things we're excited for this coming season. Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about.
Hey, let's kick this off by giving a shout out to our Prestige members. Thank you so much, Miss Mandy, 1983, Little Mac, 21, Brian Hauser, 330T, Logan Lipper, Aaron Bort, Jacob Fix, Damon Barnes, Stephen Horneck, Eric Grau, Ian Crawford, Dustin Jackson, Songstress Miku, and Dakota Cole. Thank you guys so much for supporting Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the Prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the videos, exclusive content, exclusive live streams, and hey, some tiers even get some free stuff. So hit that link in the description.
Ryan, it's Kings Island season now, and that always is an exciting time. But there's got to be a certain number of things that you're most excited about. So for you, tell our listeners the top 5 things that has you excited for 2025.
Well, like all great communicators, I created a PowerPoint for this. Number 1, the new River Racers water slide. I think that's going to be a fun ride. We talked about the flaws associated with the fact that it's short, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be bad. It's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a pleasant surprise. The racing element's going to be neat. The conveyor launch, we'll see how that goes. That could be really fun. But I'm really looking forward to seeing this taking shape. What are your thoughts on it?
I am excited about this. I think it's going to be a nice addition to Soak City Water Park. It complements the other water attractions that they have out there. It's one of those attractions that I think is going to be repeatable. The guests are going to enjoy, especially if you're lined up, with friends on the other side, and you have that race and that. So I think it's something that, a lot of the guests are going to get a lot of enjoyment out of that.
Yeah, I agree. So I am looking forward to this. I don't want, we were critical of the size and the scope of the project and stuff, but I don't want anyone to think that I'm not really excited for it. So,
well, I think, Ryan, when you talk about that, I mean, look at it. You've got a park 3 hours away that has not 1, not 2, but 3 water coasters that 1,700 feet plus long, and they're among the best in the world. And that's coming from a family-owned park. They can afford to put those kind of things in. At that level, you would think that, with Six Flags, that they would have been able to, afford to be able to do a little bit better than a 530-foot long one. So I think that's where that sentiment comes from, not just from us, but I think, we saw a lot of that when this was announced. Everybody was talking about how short it was, but we also saw how short Mystic Timbers was when that was announced, and look how that turned out.
We saw how short Orion is and how that turned out too. All right, next up. The return of Grand Carnival. So our understanding is that it was very risky that this was not going to come back this year. And I think that would have been a huge hole in the season for that not to have this. I always look forward to it. I look forward to the food, the parade, the activities, the decor around the park. I just love Grand Carnival.
I do too. I think it's one of the best events that Kings Island has ever had. And that's saying a lot since they've had, events going back to 1972. I think it's become a guest favorite. I'm glad that it is returning, and they didn't switch out with some of the other parks, are introducing this year, or they've had, and it's maybe their second or third year with it. So I'm glad that they stuck with this. I think sometimes things become tradition, things that people look forward to. It's like Universal with the Mardi Gras thing. I mean, it's the same thing every year, but people look forward to that. Dollywood has a lot of events that return year after year. There's a reason for that. So I think sometimes, we've seen this at Kings Island where something is there for, 2 years, maybe 3 years, and then they move on to something else instead of, letting it develop, so I think I'm glad that it's back. And I really hope that they stick with this for the long haul. And this is their event during the summer.
Yeah. I almost wish that it was like maybe the same 2 weeks during the summer, so you could like predict that a little bit better. I mean, that would kind of take away a little bit of flexibility, but not knowing when it is or how many days it's going to be and stuff like that is a little taxing when you're looking forward to the events. But it would be nice to know that, like, okay, the the first 2 weeks of June are always Carnival or something. I think that
I,
would
I
be a
agree
great.
with you. I think that would be the thing to do is try to find those dates that you lock it in. This is when it is, and it does certainly help with your planning.
Exactly. And part of it also is like when it's like super hot, it's not really fun to wait for the parade. Like recently they've done it later in the day, which I'm in favor of. I heard arguments against that, obviously, so it hasn't been too bad. But having it maybe a little bit earlier in the summer when it's cooler, like would be ideal. But I digress. I'm excited it's coming back. A lot of the other parks went to like the Latin music festival, which I'm sure is a great event, but it doesn't appear to have a parade. And for
That's a
Grand
big piece of
Carnival,
it.
yeah, for
Yeah,
Grand
big piece of it.
Carnival, if you ask the average Joe who knows anything about Kings Island, like what's Grand Carnival, they're not going to say it's food, it's decor. They're going to say, oh, it's when they have the parade. So if they don't have the parade, you might as well do nothing. All right. The return of the fireworks. People have no idea how close they were to not having nightly fireworks this year. Thank God they do, because I think that would have been a gaping hole in the Kings Island experience if they didn't have fireworks.
It's tradition, and it's the perfect way to cap off, that fun and memorable day at the park. You know, just over the years, just seeing, like the dad with the, 4 or 5 year old, kid, on their shoulders, watching the fireworks before they leave, and just how the families are just mesmerized by the shows and that. I mean, it just to me, it just would not be Kings Island if you did not have that on the nights that the park closed nightly at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, they were saved. I think if ever there was a year that they were going to go, that this would be the year. So unless there's some sort of like economic downturn and the company's in terrible shape and you know mushroom clouds off in the distance, I feel good about the future with this. So they're coming back. They're going to have the drones. They're going to have the lasers. I don't know what
It's
the show's going to
important.
be all about. I don't know if it's going to be new or if it's going to be even if they have last year's show. Last year's show was awesome, so I wouldn't mind that all that much. But yeah, so for those who fought for the fireworks, once again, thank you.
Yeah, and then that extends your stay too, because everybody that they hang around for the fireworks. If they didn't have those, they're leaving at 8 o'clock, so they're not getting those last meals of the night. They're not hanging around to ride the beast at night. All different kind of. I mean, it just domino effect starts. The minute that those are no longer there nightly during the summer.
And put this on your bingo card for something I didn't think I would have on my list for this year, but the return of the Gazillion Bubble Show. I was the biggest naysayer of this. Like I said, I saw a version of it at SeaWorld several years ago, and I thought it was fine, but kind of like beneath SeaWorld and probably beneath Kings Island. Saw the show. It was quite a bit different from the original one I saw. Completely won me over. Uh, Kids love it. Adults love it. It's visual. I wish it had a longer run, but I'm glad it's back.
Yeah, I'd seen it at Dollywood, so I thought it would be a something that the guest would enjoy. The thing that surprised me a little bit was how many guests you know started watching repeatedly, 2 or 3 times a day, when they were visiting. So that was a surprise for me. But no, it was a guest of all ages loved it, so it's good to see it back.
Yeah, absolutely. And then final one, the return of Winterfest. So Winterfest was never in question for 2025. Not really, not honestly in question. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Winterfest is my favorite thing that Kings Island does, and I think that it's the most wholesome. It's Kings Island at its best. It really is a fantastic event. So if you haven't been, like, what's going on? You need to go to Winterfest.
Yeah, and this is one of those events that I think should rank higher in those annual industry polls that you see
Hmm.
out there. I don't know why it doesn't, but I think it's fantastic. And when you talk about the holiday events that are out there, I mean, it rivals anybody's.
Yeah, I mean, the one that everyone talks about is Dollywood's, but I think there's an argument for this because Dollywood's it's cool because they have all the rides open. But as far as Christmasizing a park, Kings Island does it better. They do it better than Dollywood. They do it better than Disney, like the decor and stuff. Nobody does it like Kings Island. So yeah, it should rank higher in golden tickets and USA Today and so on. Don, what are your top 5 things you're looking forward to this year?
My visits to Dollywood, Holiday World, Kentucky Kingdom, Kennywood, and of course CP. And when I'm saying CP, I'm talking Camden Park.
What about at Kings Island though?
Kings Island. You're talking about Kings Island. Oh, okay. I think you touched on a lot of it. I would add in, I'm right there with you on Grand Carnival. I think for me, I would have the Beast on the list as something that, looking forward to with the track work and
Sure.
everything. Roller coasters a big part of my visits. I want to ride coasters, and the Beast is, a legend in its own time, you could say. And I think that would be one of the five. So Grand Carnival, the Beast. Um, for me, Winterfest, coming back, very much looking forward to that. The dining experience. I have the dining experience on there, not the
Sure.
bubble show. So for me, it's seeing that continue to be elevated and being able to take part in that as somebody, that would have a dining plan. And, the other thing for me would be the Food and Wine Festival. I'd like to
I thought
see in
about
year,
that.
I'd like to see in year two, what, if there's any changes to that. Is it something that, we're hearing more about? Did they do the outreach that we
Hmm.
talked about, to the people that are the food and wine type, the bloggers, to get more people, talking about it, not while the event's going on, because by the time their stuff gets published, it's over. I mean, in advance of that, bring them out a couple of days before, or maybe on opening night, and just really having, 50 to 100 of these different bloggers, come out and experience it, just so more people know about it, because the only people that really knew about it are the ones that were, heading toward Coney Mall, and they stumbled across it, and just saw it. They didn't know what was going on at that time, and it was really well done. So the team at Kings Island, did a great job putting that event together. But I just think not enough people knew about it. So I'd like to see what they do different this year. I'm looking forward to that, to seeing how they take that event and find different ways to grow it. So it's not just, I happen to be here today, I'm gonna check this out. That people are coming specifically for that event.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you do an event and you can't, I mean, the point of the event is to sell tickets. If you do an event and people go anyway, and they're like, "Oh, they're doing this today too," you've wasted your money. You failed.
Yeah.
So
So how
you've
many
got
was
to.
it for me? I had Beast, I had the dining, I had Winterfest, I had Grand Carnival, and then of course, yeah, I said the Food and Wine Festival.
Awesome. So, it's going to line up to be an amazing season this year, I'm sure. What are your top five favorite things you're excited for coming up for the 2025 season? Leave them in the comments below. Now, let's move on to a segment we like to call Buy or Sell. Don, buy or sell? Kings Island, as part of the new Six Flags, will have multiple days this year when the park announces a closure in advance because the weather forecast calls for a good chance of rain. Buy or sell?
Unfortunately, I'm going to buy.
Do
We've seen that happen already at some of the different parks. We saw, uh, Six Flags America, Six Flags Great Adventure, King's Dominion, announced that there was like a 20% chance of rain, and then it turned out, for the most part, the day was pretty clear. That they nobody understood why they were closed. That they could have been open. So unfortunately, I do think, there's some days that it looks like there's a, good chance that it's going to rain. Most, if not all the day, all day long. I could see them doing that, unfortunately. So I'm buying.
you think like it's going to be like 20% chance of rain when they close, or do you think
No,
it'll
I think
be?
it'd have to be a little bit more than that. I mean, I think it would have to be, something where it said, like 70%, 75% all day, with thunderstorms, throughout the day. And I think then they, would look to do that. But I don't think that they always were hesitant to even close the park, early, 7 or 8 o'clock at night on some of those rain nights. And those have become more frequent in
Yeah.
recent years. So I would think that, it's a whole new world that Kings Island is living in, under the Six Flags umbrella. And I think if there's a day that it just doesn't look like business is going to be good because of the forecast, I think that'll take precedence.
I'm going to sell because I think they got a ton of egg on their face from the whole King's Dominion thing. And I don't know what the repercussions going to be, but I know in the long term it's very bad for business to do that sort of thing. So if if you start to get into a situation where if people look at the calendar and there's a 20% chance of rain, they're like, oh, they'll probably close anyway. you're hurting attendance on days that could potentially be okay. You know,
Right. Right.
so I think that the King's Dominion thing was terribly embarrassing. I think the fact that they had the Melon and Coaster Network out there and they got early ride on Raptura, which indicated that that the park could have opened. So they had them out to ride. There's a dance competition that day that was either supposed to happen at the park or they had an outing at the park. They canceled on them the night before. This was not a good look for them. So
No,
maybe
and a lot of people who had plans, who traveled there and got hotels and everything in the area, they ended up spending the day at Busch Gardens. They had a great day.
they did. Now King's Dominion was always quicker to pull the trigger for closing. Like even my experience there doing fireworks and stuff, there was a night when we didn't have to shoot the fireworks because they closed at 8 instead of 10 or whatever. Um, so I don't think it's going to be that bad. You're right though. I think if it's raining, like it's seriously raining, they're not going to stick around till 10. They'll close at 8 or whatever. But
No, but
I
I
don't
think
think
there could be a day in advance. So like they're asking, in this question here that they do that in advance. Like it's a Wednesday and it looks like Thursday it's going to be, it's the terrible day that they announce on Wednesday at like 4 o'clock. Due to the forecast, we're not going to be open tomorrow.
I think it's possible, but you got to remember the days that the park closed historically were ones where it certainly wasn't gonna work out. Like Friday, and it was 100% chance of rain, and it was going to be thunderstorms, or um, I remember a haunt Sunday when they first did haunt Sundays. Remember the year you did bare bones nights and all that stuff, like 2007
Yes.
or 8 or so. Um, you closed one Sunday because it was pouring. It would have been miserable at the park. Uh, so that was guaranteed to be a loser. I think that you'll just see them pull the trigger a little bit faster, where it won't be a last resort. But no, I don't think that they're going to close Kings Island a day before with in a situation like Kings Dominion had at 20%.
Yeah, I think maybe there'll be more days too where they just don't open Soak City. That possibility that some people could get wet.
Well, yeah, you don't want to get wet when it's raining. I mean, come on. Um, Soak City closing saves them so much labor. I'm surprised they don't do that more often. Um, okay, that's a great buy or sell. But let's move on to some Six Flags headline news. So the Arlington skyline is changing yet again. If you're ever driven along I-30 along Arlington or through Arlington, you know that Six Flags Hurricane Harbor sits on the north side of the interstate, and you can easily pick out where the park is thanks to this big block water slide called the Black Hole. It's an 80-foot tall tower resembling a gigantic flying black saucer that has twin black slides coming out of each side that are totally enclosed. The ride has been a fixture for the park for decades until now. The black hole at Six Flags Hurricane Harbor is being demolished. News of this attraction's demise came as a surprise to many park guests. It has been one of their favorite rides for a long time because they could slide down the 500-foot length water slide in a tube with their best friend in total darkness. Yeah, it's going to be missed. That's a bummer.
It is, and another attraction that closes without any kind of send off, opportunity to get in your last rides or last slides. So a little disappointing, but maybe not as surprising that this would happen based on what we've been seeing over the last few months.
Do you think so? What do you think the ultimate end game is for not announcing these rides closing? Do you think that it's going to be that general? Well, one of three possibilities. One is it just becomes a norm, or do you think it's going to be something that kind of drives holes in the trust of people at the parks? Or the other possibility is, do you think every time there's a rumor something's being removed, you're going to have dozens and dozens of enthusiasts email the PR guy at the park or email the park directly saying, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? And then, as we've seen in the past, they've denied it at times. And then, it ended up being true.
What I know is this: if you don't say anything, sometimes you're trying to avoid the negativity that you might get if it's a popular attraction. You're something else is just around the corner from happening. Maybe it's the haunt season starting, Winterfest, whatever, and you don't want to necessarily have people talking about that at a time That's something. So I remember, that those discussions going on when Vortex was being removed. Like, do we really have to announce this? Yes, I think we need to be transparent. That was my thought process, with it. But I think in trying to avoid all of those kind of things, or seeing, social media, and they won't even make a post on social because they're afraid it'll just be filled with negative comments. But that's okay. Let people talk. I mean, these attractions, I mean, they're a part of people's lives. Maybe it's their favorite ride, maybe it was their first job. Uh, you know, just a lot of different things go into it that, it's not just a line item, for the corporate, group up there. It's something that it matters to people, and I think you owe it to them when a ride that's been around for a while is going to be removed. You should allow them to come and get their last rides on it. King Dakar, to me, if they had been transparent about that and upfront, I think there would have been a lot of people coming from a lot of different places, not just that New Jersey area, that would have been coming to get in their last rides on that. I think it would have helped drive attendance. Sure, you would have some negativity with it, but the goodwill is going to outweigh that. And you keep doing these kind of things, you do lose trust with the consumer. You do have people that don't renew because they just can't count on certain rides, their favorites being there year after year. They just lose interest, they lose trust. So I don't think you win or gain anything when you keep it a secret. You're just not transparent about it until after the fact. I just think, the parks need to be a little more upfront and in front with everybody about what's going on.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Yeah, but off my soapbox.
Your mileage may vary, but that's just me. I just feel that it's important.
Don, as a paying customer, you have no right to know.
I know what these rides, mean to people. I know what rides at Kings Island mean to me, or in other parks around the country. There's a lot of rides out there that if, I knew I had a last chance to ride something, and it was something that I spent time, going to these parks and enjoying those coasters, or other flat rides or whatever it might be. I would certainly try to get in a last ride if I had enough time to be able to plan.
Yeah. Don, tell them about the t-shirts.
Tower Topics t-shirts. They come in a wicked green color, any size that you want, including the children's sizes. They are $22. That includes shipping. If you're interested in one, just simply drop an email at donhelbig@themeparksbydon.com and just put Tower Topics t-shirt in the subject line. And if you don't want to use email, you can just send us a message through our X, which is Tower_Topics. Certainly hope you follow us there. And once we have, contact from you, we'll send back out the QR code once the transaction goes through. Just a matter of days before you get your shirt.
Perfect. Yeah, $22 including shipping. We'll be right back with the listener questions. All right, first listener question. Kevin from Ohio. He said, one ride has to go. Which one are you choosing? Congo Falls, Whitewater Canyon, Charlie Brown's Rushing River Log Ride, or Windseeker?
That's how the Windseeker's there with the water rides. For me, one has to go. I'm going to pick Congo Falls. And the reason being is I just think that of the other two water rides, is the one that is not as popular as the other two. Mm-hmm. And just, I just think it's a spot too in the park. It's prime real estate, for something else to go there. You take out the other two, there's not a whole lot you can do in those areas.
Yeah. I agree. All the other ones I could potentially ride. I'm probably not going to ride Congo. Whitewater Canyon, I think, is neat. I'm not a big fan of getting soaked, but I think that's a neat ride, and I like how it interacts with Mystic. Kind of like how the
40 years old this year, Whitewater Canyon. Suddenly, it's one of the older rides in the park at 40.
I know, it's younger than me. All right. Larry from Goshen, Ohio. He said, "Why was Snoopy Soapbox Racers the name chosen for that ride? I think it's dumb. It's as adorable as it is predictable, as Ryan would say." Anyway, why not have a more fun name like Holiday World did with Good Gravy? Soapbox Racers.
I can see where the adorable as adorable as it is predictable because they do have one of the Peanuts. There's a show about that. Where they're soapbox racing and all that. I think the racing theme is what they were going for. They wanted something like that, and so that kind of tied in. It was a way that they can incorporate all the different Peanuts characters, on the train. So for me, it was just something that just kind of tied into what they were looking for the theme to be. But in terms of having more fun, like Holiday World did, I mean, nobody had more fun than Holiday World, with Good Gravy, and they got everybody in the country talking about that ride just because of the name. Had they named it something else, something more generic, it doesn't have that kind of conversation going for it before it opens. So there were some different names bantied about uh, before I left Kings Island. Soapbox Racers was always kind of the leader in the clubhouse because that's what a lot of the people at planning and design and all that were kind of looking to do. But one of the ones that I thought came up in our marketing team discussion was you know kind of a nod to Charlie Brown and call it Good Grief.
Oh, that would have been so funny if it was Good Grief.
And this was
Good
before
Gravy.
anybody
That would
knew
have been
about Good
so
Gravy. Yeah,
funny.
this was before anybody knew about Good Gravy. But at that time, you're thinking the train, it'd be yellow with the black, Charlie Brown like his shirt stripe and everything. But I think that would have been fun, for the guests and everything to have a ride called Good Grief and uh, a way to kind of tie in Charlie Brown with the ride. He doesn't really, he's got a couple like Charlie Brown wind up in that, but um, that's the one that got my vote was Good Grief.
Good Grief would have been a good name, but I will say this: both Good Gravy and Snoopy Soapbox Racers were the perfect names for those rides at those parks. Good Gravy was uniquely Holiday World, and I think if Kings
Oh yeah,
Island tried to do something like that, it wouldn't have made a lot of
yeah, they're
sense.
not quirky like that,
Well,
where it
and
just
it's way out of left field, and Holiday World kind of like can get away with that, while Kings Island just people wouldn't get it. And the Soapbox Racers thing, it's like it's a great theme for the ride. They get to have this audio clips of like,
yeah.
put on your day, like I think it's fine. Like I don't.
I don't mind it. No, I don't mind it. I just think, if you were looking for something a little more, with a little more imagination, a little more fun, Good Grief would have been a good name for that.
But the name also kind of describes what it is too.
It does.
I
It
mean, I
does.
don't know. But yeah, Good Grief versus Good Gravy. Imagine the episode we would have had on that.
Yeah, but no, I think I mean, just from the beginning. The leader in the clubhouse was Soapbox Racers, and there was going to have to be a real strong argument as to why you wouldn't name it that. So I thought merchandise, wise that they could have some fun with Good Grief, but no, I think it's fine. It works the way it is, and it fits the theme, and everybody seems to love it. That goes to Kings Island, and so why not?
Yeah, yeah, like I said, I like it. It's I wish it had a really cool queue like Good Gravy does. Like as far as like the ride experience itself, there's a lot more that could have been done for the queue and like. But as far as the ride, like the ride vehicles look great.
Oh, they
Uh,
do. Fantastic.
the station looks great. The presentation of the ride from the outside works really well. So I think it's overall a winner. It's just not Good Gravy. It's not that weird. Keith from Bowling Green, he said, Ryan, from my understanding, creates the episode thumbnails. What program does he use? They keep getting better. The one from the voicemail show had me laughing. I use Pixelmator Pro. I'm not a good Photoshop person or whatever. Everything that you see is like pieced together. I can't like create stuff. I agree, like to pat myself on the back, I think they have gotten better. But the person screaming into the phone from the voicemail episode was I used ChatGPT and asked it to create an image of somebody screaming into a phone. So that's how I got that piece of that image. But Pixelmator Pro just got purchased by Apple. So it'll probably like integrate with Final Cut. I use all Apple stuff. So Final Cut, Apple Motion. The old thumbnails, when I first started making them that weren't completely flat, I didn't know how to use Photoshop. And there's like a free version called GIMP that I used to have that kind of stunk. But I used to actually make them in Blender and then just export an image out of there. But there's limitations to that. And I'm kind of happy with how the the Pixelmator Pro stuff has turned out. So I appreciate the compliment, but that's what I use.
Yeah, I agree that they've continually have gotten a lot better, Ryan, as we've gone along here. The reason Ryan does all the designs and that for the thumbnails is because I'm not a graphic designer. Like, Ryan has all these different programs that, I'm a storyteller, not a graphic designer. So, we leave that to Ryan. And I there's a lot of fun. I don't know what he's going to use until I see the episode has been uploaded sometimes. And, I get a chuckle out of some of them, but, I think it definitely paints a picture on a lot of these about what that episode's going to be like. So, Ryan, I want to, say the same thing as our questioner there that, you're doing a fantastic job with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's funny how the separation of duties is it's so divided between us, and how the show just comes together at the last minute, because like
I'll structure the, like kind of the, these are kind of some of the things we can talk about. I'll, copy and paste the different questions and that come in and drop it in. Been having to do some things a little different. It's more where I was, I'm doing a lot of it by voice now because of some vision challenges and that. So I hope sometimes that it listens to what I say when I'm kind of like saying, okay, now it's time for the listener questions, or now it's time for, the Six Flags headline news, with what's being said there. So, there's different ways, the outline and stuff, formatting that, for the show. Ryan's doing a lot of the graphics. Ryan's doing the uploading to all the different platforms wherever you get your podcast, and I do want to, while we're on that, I mean, just thanks to everybody who does listen, no matter where you get your podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or, Spotify, Apple, wherever, we appreciate that you listen to the show.
Yeah. So we've discussed this before, but I mean, sometimes I don't get the episode, like the format of the episode, till like, I don't know, 5 o'clock or later, and then we record it around 6.
Tom, you get them a lot earlier now. A lot of times you get them like 12:30, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. A couple of weeks ago too. This is how this works, everybody. Too, is I'm just minutes away from having laser surgery in my left eye, and I'm just sitting there and waiting for them to come back in and start the procedure and all that. So I'm just like, okay, Ryan, what do you want for episode C? What are you thinking? And then Ryan will come back with something like, what do you think about this? And then we just kind of, go from there with it. It's all pretty standard stuff though, every week, because we'll move things around as to when we, say something about t-shirts, or maybe, what placement buy or sell has. But for the most part, there's the body, of what the topic is basically about. And then there's other things, the tower topics tidbits, for your information that we've introduced with that. And a lot of those kind of things that end up on these episodes that we talk about come from you, our listeners. We'll see things that are being talked about, whether it's on the Tower Topics Facebook group. We'll see things in the Kings Island Facebook group. We'll see things that people are talking about on our X. And it's like, well, those are interesting. People are interested in those kind of things. That's what they're searching for. That's the information they're looking for. And then that gets worked into the episode. The show is, it's really what, it's for you. It's a way to keep you informed and everything. If it was about what, Ryan or I wanted to talk about all the time, it would either be, fireworks, or it would be about the history of the Racer and the Beast.
Shows would be one that we would talk about all the time.
Yeah.
We do probably episodes on the Pub Burger once a month.
Yeah, we could do an episode on that every day. I mean, come on.
Well, it's, to me, like, I feel like the episodes I want to do, but I feel like we can't do, would be like, let's spend a day people watching and talk about what we saw,
we don't want to do that kind of thing, we also, we find a lot of things out too that we don't want to bring up and talk about, on the show. We want there to be some surprises for, I guess I think the spoiler stuff isn't something that, is one of our favorite things to do. Now there's timing for that kind of thing. We were out there with the Racer being open for Winterfest, but it gets to a point to where, if the park's sitting on that for too long, then it's not news by the time you and I talk about it. So that's going to come into play too sometimes, is how quick the park moves on something. if they know they're going to do something and they sit on it, can't help it if we end up, talking about it because you're now, 15, 20 days away from Winterfest.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't even know stuff that you bring up, but like you break news on the show and I don't know, a couple episodes ago, you're
Yeah.
like, Winterfest won't be, or Windseeker won't be ready for opening weekend. And I don't see that in my notes.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to say we have a lot of good scouts out there that,
We do.
that provide us with a lot of information, and we cross check. That's another thing. It's not
Yeah.
because the first person told us something, we're not going to run with that. We have to hear it from, a second or even third source sometimes. And we want to make sure these people sometimes don't even know each other, so we're getting that same vibe, same information, because, unless we feel very confident about what we're talking about, we're not going to put it out there.
Yeah. So we request that any leaks be submitted to us in writing with a notary. That's how we roll to make sure it's right. All right.
Yeah.
I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.